Hiya 10, it's Miss Albie here. I am going to talk through the plan that I've created based on the third big question in relation to Macbeth. Now remember, these big questions are there to develop your understanding, your critical thinking, help you with memorizing quotations, and think about the whole plot and the characters and why they've been used by Shakespeare and what his intentions are. Okay, so like I said last time, this is not a question that you answer in one word. It's certainly not a closed question, and you should be planning your answer before you actually write your answer, and then you should write your answer in essay form. Okay, so the question for this week is, how far do you think Shakespeare presents Macbeth as a man in control? This is a question that could quite likely come up in the exam, which is why I've picked it. And before I go into my plan, what I've done is I've just highlighted some of the keywords in the question. I mean, nearly every word's highlighted there, to be fair. And I thought I'd just talk you through why they are so important and what they mean. So if we look at the first two words here, how far is an important opening to your question, because it's basically allowing you to come up with different ideas and have shades of agreement. Therefore, you don't have to write your whole essay surrounding aspects of Macbeth being in control. You could also discuss moments that you encounter when you read the play where he has no control at all. Okay? Or, again, because it says how far, you can focus solely on one option, complete control, and then formulate the answer around that, or a lack of control. It's completely up to you. The next word I've highlighted is you. Well, clearly because it's your opinion. It's your opinion that matters. You are the reader. So anytime we talk about, what is the effect? What's the effect on the audience? What's the effect on the reader? We are asking you to think personally about how you are affected by it, by what was written. How do you think, how do you feel, how do you judge different characters and moments in the play because of the way Shakespeare writes? Which then moves us on to the main man himself, Shakespeare. Remember that they are his words. They're not the character's words. So when you're analysing the language, you don't talk about Macbeth's use of an imperative. It's Shakespeare's use of imperative to present Macbeth. Okay, because just like the imperative, the character Macbeth is also a method that Shakespeare uses to present a range of ideas. The next word I've highlighted here is presents, and that's just to remind you that when you're looking at the use of the word presents, you're thinking about evidence or quotations, how Shakespeare presents him. You show this presentation through quotations and also the methods that Shakespeare uses. So that could be looking at imagery, metaphors, similes. It could be looking at stage directions, or it could be looking at single word level analysis and commenting on the use of a noun or an adjective and so on. Macbeth is underlined there, well, because he's the named character. He may not be the main character in the exam, but I thought I would just say something that might seem really obvious, but people do trip themselves up on. Because the play is called Macbeth, but you could get a question about Macbeth the character. Just double check that it is, you think you understand it. So, for instance, in this question, it's how Shakespeare presents Macbeth the character and not the whole play. Okay? As a man in control. So the next word I highlighted was man. The reason being, I thought, it's quite interesting contextually to focus on gender, the importance of gender roles in Jacobean England. Could you relate the fact that Macbeth is a man and is meant to act like a man to his ability to control or lose control of a situation? Which leads us on to the last word that I've highlighted there, and that is control. Do you think that he does have control? Who does he control? What does he control? How does he gain control? Or how, in fact, does he actually lose control? All of those points are really relative. So, moving on, I'm just going to have a look at Act 1. What I've done is I've just summarised a couple of quotations that you could reference. You don't have to use these. It's just an example. And what I've tried to do is look at different points of the play, starting from the start to the very end. Okay, so Act 5. At any point, you know, obviously this is recorded, so you can pause, you can make notes, you can stop and think about what you want to take and then move on and hear what else I've got to say. So, first thing I would do is I would look at Act 1 and I'd be thinking about, well, is he controlled in Act 1? Does he have control? And my answer would be both yes and no, actually. I put yes here at first because I was thinking of in Act 1, Scene 2. In Act 1, Scene 2, we hear reports of Macbeth. Remember, we haven't actually met him at this point, but we hear that he's noble, he's brave, and he's worthy. He defeats 2 armies. So if he has the ability to impress all of his noblemen, his peers, and the king, and defeat 2 armies, surely that is a reflection of him being in control. Okay? There is irony, though, because what we later see from Lady Macbeth is she doesn't actually agree with this sense of control that other people think Macbeth has, okay? She thinks he's quite pitiful and weak and almost too good, maybe even too feminine. So I've just said here that it's ironic that she doesn't actually feel the same. I have also referenced here this quotation. It says, "We will proceed no further in this business," and this is from Macbeth, when he tries to control the situation between him and his wife and the idea of killing King Duncan. He doesn't want to go ahead with it, basically. He's changed his mind. Wish he'd never said anything to his wife. However, his control is short-lived, and I've got a key word here for you to use, and that is transient, which essentially means short-lived. His power, his control over his wife at this point in the play is really short-lived. It doesn't take her much to make him change his mind again and get what she wants, which is the crown. Why does she think that he can't actually go through with it? Because she thinks that he's too full of the milk of human kindness. Okay, so in Act 1, Scene 5, this is her perception of a husband and what she will do in order to control him and get what she wants. She will pour my spirit in thine ear. So these 2 quotations here might be good to look at in relation to control and the lack of control Macbeth has in his marriage. It's obvious that there's a switch here in gender roles, and it demonstrates her manipulative side and how she's going to gain control of her husband through manipulation. I will just stop here and say, even though it says how Shakespeare presents Macbeth as a man in control, that does not mean you can't consider Lady Macbeth, okay? Because obviously the whole reason why we could view Macbeth as someone who doesn't have control is because other people around him have it. For instance, his wife. Another person or persons you could comment on in relation to having control over Macbeth are the witches, okay? Now, stick with me here. I love this quotation. I love the idea that very early on, Shakespeare's dropping hints to the reader that, Macbeth, Lady Macbeth as well, and the witches are all sort of intertwined in this sense of evilness. And we see it here. The first time we actually meet Macbeth, he remarks on the day as being so foul and fair a day I have not seen. Okay, remember this first time we actually meet Macbeth. It's a paradox. It echoes the words of the witches in the first scene, fair is foul and foul is fair. And I thought might be a nice high order point to include in your essay in relation to control, because is Shakespeare actually saying to the audience that the witches already have control over Macbeth? You can see this through his words. His words are mirroring the witches. Therefore, already this early stage, before he even meets the witches, it's almost like they've put some sort of spell on him and they control him. Okay? Or you could contradict that point and actually say that this paradox reflects the fact that he controls the witches. It's up to you. It's the joy of literature. I would move on then and have a look at Act 2. Okay, so here with Act 2, I thought about, how is he controlled? In Act 1, I've said he's, controlled on the battlefield, but then it could be argued that he's controlled by his wife and by the witches. In Act 2, and moving on, Act 3, he's controlled by guilt. Okay, once he goes through with the murder of King Duncan, he immediately regrets it. Macbeth does murder sleep. He talks at length about the idea that he's not going to get over this. And it's interesting because the one safe haven you have, you can forget all your worries, really, is sleep. It's a time where you really relax and have peace, and he loses control. He understands that he's going to lose control of his sleep pattern, because nobody who has committed such a crime of that level will be able to get over it. And it's almost like it's too little too late. He's realised the extremity of his actions, and that he's not going to be able to live a normal life now, because he does have a guilty conscience. I've also referenced the fact that by Act 2 he has submitted to his wife. Therefore, the gender roles have been contradicted here in relation to what you would expect in Jacobean England. He has done what his wife asked, and he's killed the king. In doing so, his mental stability deteriorates. So we're now going on a downward spiral as he loses control of his mental state. You could also argue, though, that he does have control at this point. He does know what he's doing. He does know that it's wrong. Therefore, again, just to contradict what I'm saying there, because to look at, different interpretations, oppositional interpretations will get you a really high mark. So you could also look at the idea that actually he is in control of his own thoughts, because he understands what he's done is wrong. And here in the dagger scene, this is the dagger I say before me, just before he's about to kill King Duncan, he remarks on it being a false creation, what he can see in front of him. So unlike later on in Act 3, Scene 4, where he thinks he can see Banquo's ghost, or is it hallucination? We'll never know. He knows at this point that the dagger is not real. He refers to it as a false creation. He also understands that the reason why he might be seeing it is because he's feeling stressed and anxious and under a lot of pressure. But at this point, he can comprehend what is real and what is not. Okay? Then, just looking at Act 3 and Act 4, I've said again in relation to control, he turns to violence to stay in control. As you know, he has his best friend, Banquo, killed, as well as all of Macduff's family. I've got some quotations referenced here from Act 3 and Act 4. Again, looking at who is dominating the relationship between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. For instance, here, are you a man? So she calls Macbeth out on his masculinity. You could definitely reference this in relation to the fact that he is quite quickly losing control of his masculinity and his role in his relationship as the man, the husband. Just this snippet of a quotation, when he thinks he's looking at Banquo's ghost, he talks about what he can see would appall the devil, something that is absolutely horrific. So is that referencing the fact that he's appalled at what he has done in having his friend murdered? Is it showing that he can't control his guilty conscience again, because he's letting this out in front of other noblemen, which, in turn means he's losing control of his crown and his country, because they'll start to lose faith in him if they don't think that he's up to the job. By Act 4, we've got more death, and also this idea that his hubris, his sense of overconfidence, is spiral out of control. He goes back to see the witches, and he's imperative, he takes command, which you could say is stupidity from his part. Is it that he's so overconfident that he thinks he can control everyone? Answer me, I conjure you. And also, just before he enters this scene, on entry to the witches' cave, one of them remarks, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." Now, it's a really ironic gesture for witches to prick their thumbs, which means hide their thumbs, because this is what people would do to ward off evil spirits. So highly ironic, because they are the evil spirit. However, they are looking at Macbeth entering their domain, and it's like they're scared of him. So take what you want from that. But I was thinking, does that therefore suggest that he is in control of the witches? Last act, Act 5. Clearly he loses control at this point because he is killed. He's murdered by Macduff. He's beheaded in Act 5, Scene 8. I have made reference to an earlier scene, which was Act 3, Scene 4, when he's talking to Banquo's ghost hallucination. He talks about his gory locks. Don't shake your gory locks at me. You could say that this is a link to the beheading of Macbeth. You know, when he has his head chopped off, his gory locks. Is it foreshadowing his downfall? And basically he's getting what he deserves as a tragic hero. Just before he dies, sorry, because I am moving around a bit quick and going back and forward in the acts. Welcome to my brain. He hears that people are coming to the castle, led by the likes of Malcolm and Macduff, and he basically doesn't care anymore. He says, bring me no more reports, and I cannot taint with fear. So I just thought you could have a look at this in relation to control. Is it that he feels in such a good way because he's being told that, you know, well, he thinks he's invincible because of what the witches have told him, in relation, you know, no man born of woman can harm Macbeth? Or is it that he's scared? So is it facade he's wearing here to look like he's in control, but actually underneath he's crumbling? Or is he actually just really naive, again, because of his sense of hubris? Has he become so naive to the fact that he's not invincible and actually other people can ruin his chances of remaining king? Well, he's ruined that himself, really. Finally, I will just reference a few things in relation to context that I haven't already said. I would look at leadership and kingship and this idea that a leader who lacks control over his people is not a good leader. So is that what Shakespeare's intending to say to his audience? You need a strong leader. Is he referencing King James and saying, you know, this is someone that we've got now who is strong, therefore we need to get behind him? I've also said here how a Jacobin audience would be outraged at his need for control, need for the crown. Therefore, they would expect him to lose control as penance for committing regicide, thus disturbing the great chain of being. The fact that he's meddled in the great chain of being, the audience would hope and expect him to die. I guess it's a cathartic process, the fact that he got what he deserved. The bad guy lost in the end. Other references you might want to make in relation to context, looking at gender roles, which I've mentioned to some extent already, and look at the importance of sin and religion as to why he might lose that control. Thanks for listening. Bye.